Hey everybody, this is Bo Sanders, and in just a few minutes, people are going to start arriving for week 3 of Faith Basics here at the Loft. We're in Westwood United Methodist Church, upstairs in Old Helms Hall, and we've been meeting here on Wednesday nights to talk about some basics of faith as our small groups take off the summer, and people wanted to have this conversation. So we're about to do week 3, which is God. Last week was the church, which was very interesting. And, 2 weeks ago was the church, and then last week was the Bible. Now, not everybody was able to be here for week 2 when we talked about the Bible, so I thought it would be a good idea. Before week 3, I was going to put up this video trying to get you up to speed on week 2. In case you wanted to talk about the Bible or know how we talk about the Bible at the Loft. And so I thought I would run you through, before I erased the big whiteboard, I thought I would run you through the closing analogy that I used in case you wanted to be a part of the upcoming conversation. We're going through the book of Galatians this summer as a church on Sundays when we gather. And so the Bible is really central and integral to what we do. But it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Not everybody has the same opinion about what the Bible is or how it functions or operates in our life of faith or our community. So I thought it'd be fun to run you through this real quick. So here's what happened. For all the amazing things that the Bible is, here's the one thing we're sure the Bible isn't. The Bible is not basic instructions before leaving earth. B-I-B-L-E. That's the one thing we know it absolutely is not. It's not basic. It's full of stories, rarely instructions. I mean, they're scattered here and there, but it's definitely not instructions like a manual or it's not instructions. It's not about before you leave earth. One of my favorite sayings is, a lot of people talk about the Bible, specifically the Gospels, as earthly stories about heavenly truths. But one of my favorite authors, Ched Myers, says, no. They're earthy stories with heavy truths. So they're not earthly stories with heavenly truths. They're earthy stories with heavy truths. I think that is so much better. And it's not about before you leave earth. I always quote Muhammad Ali. I don't want pie in the sky and the by and by. I want something sound on the ground while I'm around. So the one thing we know is that the Bible is not basic instructions before leaving earth. Here's what we think it is. It is a collection of 66 books. The Bible's not one book. People sometimes get mad at me. They're like, oh, the Bible's not your favorite book. Well, it's Biblia means like library. So it's a collection of books. 66. 39 in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Testament. 27 in the New Testament, the Christian Testament. And when these come together, they are communities of conversation. They represent stories and perspectives, agendas, and theologies that are often what Walter Brueggemann calls disputatious. They are in dispute sometimes. Some people think kings are a great idea. Some people say kings are terrible. It's a man-made thing and it takes our eyes off of God and we fall away. We go through these cycles of mistrust and then God has to bring us back around. And so anyway, you have all these different communities. In the New Testament, we know that James and the letter to the Hebrews often have come into conflict throughout Christian history, on and on and on. You have 4 Gospels for a very specific reason. So, with all of that being said, in the next 2 minutes, I want to run you through our closing analogy and maybe get your feedback. So, after the Enlightenment, after the Protestant Reformation, we read the Bible very differently. After the Gutenberg press, everyone can have a Bible in their hands. They read it in their own language, that's number 2. And number 3, they interpret it for themselves. So we have a decline in, say, papal authority or the church's authority for owning the only way that you're allowed to interpret something. So everyone has it in their hands, 1. 2, it's in their own language. 3, they are the authority. So if they're sitting in church and the preacher says this means this and this, and they're like, the heck it does. They just walk out and the next week they're church shopping. They're looking for a different church with a place where they can be fed because they agree with the interpretation that's coming from the pulpit. So 3 big changes in the last couple hundred years. And what I think that has resulted in is this 4-stage kind of understanding that you need when you're going to come as a community to read and interpret the Bible. live out faith together. So here's what I think is going on with the Bible. If you're going to be a person of faith, I think there was an actual event. Whether it was the Red Sea, the deliverance out of Egypt, whether it was Jesus' birth, burning bush, whatever it is. They're writing about it because something happened. There actually was an event. So I'm just going to put a pin in that because I actually think something happened. I'm totally okay with that. As a person of faith, we make this declaration, something definitely happened. Okay, so that's the event. Here's the thing. As that event is presented to us, or I would say represented to us, there are two things going on in there. You have the event and how it is being presented, but you also have something else, which is before the event, there were these other cultural elements that I represent here with a square, triangle, circle, hexagon, whatever. These different cultural elements. So whether that's, say for the Christian New Testament, you have Hebrew stories that they can draw on. You have Babylonian stories. You have other stories in the Middle East, Europe, Africa, that were around, and they can pull from them thematically and weave different things together. I'll get back to that in a second. So you have these things that are sitting around. You have the event. The person or community that is telling us about that story represents it to us. Both the event is contained in there, some representation of that, but also these other cultural things that are being woven in. And then what we have to do with it as a community is both interpret it and apply it. So I have this little barrier I've drawn to pass through, and this is often called hermeneutics by scholars. It's like schools of interpretation or lenses of interpretation, both to interpret and to apply, and those need to be done, in my humble though accurate opinion, according to the genre. So if it's poetry, it's done differently than if it's history, which is done differently than if it is, like say, law, whatever. It has to be done according to the genre. That's the big word. It's not hermeneutics. The most important word is genre. Here, let me give you an example as we close. When Luke and Matthew represent the event of Jesus' birth, they do it differently. Those stories, if you take time to look at them, you may have seen them harmonized before, like people try and sync them up. But if you actually look at them, Luke and Matthew don't tell that story exactly the same way. So, Matthew, who's doing more of a Jewish thing, reaches back and pulls out some Moses-themed elements. So you have the book of 5, you have these 5 divisions, and you'll see that show up in Matthew in these 5 parts. You have this Moses theme, which is why when Matthew is telling us about Jesus' birth, he has to have Jesus connected to Egypt somehow. So Herod becomes kind of a Pharaoh character, and then Jesus becomes kind of the new Moses delivering his people, right? All that imagery. So he reaches back and grabs this Moses connection. He has him go to Egypt and connect and to come back, and then the way that he tells the story. So you have the event of Jesus' birth. As Matthew tells it, he reaches back and grabs this Moses, this Hebraic imagery. He brings that in. He presents it differently than Luke does. So you have both the event of Jesus' birth, but you also have these Hebrew elements from the Exodus narrative. And that's what makes Matthew different than Luke. So when we read it as contemporary readers, post-modern era, we have to both interpret it and apply it in our communities. And this is according to the genre. So it's important that you read a gospel according to gospel literature, and that you can't read a gospel the same way that you would read, say, the book of Revelation, or I would argue even, say, the book of Ruth. But that's all going on there. So we have been going for, 9.5 minutes. I do apologize for the length. I have been speeding through this as fast as I can. So I just did an 1.5-hour presentation in under 10 minutes. I do apologize for the speediness of it, but now you have kind of a condensed video. You can watch it, join the conversation, get up to speed on what we're all talking about. I dropped some vocabulary words in there, and we would love to have you be a part of the conversation, whether it's online or you come to the gatherings on Sunday. Don't be afraid to show up on Wednesday night throughout the summer, every other Wednesday night. So tonight is God. You can't come to that one because you're going to miss it. Jesus, Spirit. Ooh, that's going to be a good one. And then we end with the future and the end of the world. Ooh. All right. So thank you all for watching. My name is Bo Sanders. If you have any questions, email me, post on the blog, comment, whatever. I love being a part of this conversation, and I hope that this has in any way been helpful to you. If you are ready to move from a faith that is childlike, but not childish. That's one of my favorite sayings. God bless you. Peace be with you.